Patrick Bell here from Finexia Financial Group. As Tony mentioned, we're a non-bank lender concentrating in the childcare space. We're pretty much this is our focus in our business. And today I wanted to talk specifically around the childcare centre and the industry and why it's an outstanding opportunity for investors. And a little beyond Finexia, this is our sole business here. In the lending space currently, and if you want access to the childcare industry in Australia from a lending perspective or perspective at all, then certainly, next slide please, then certainly Finexia is the place to do that. So as I said, I want to talk a little about childcare and the industry in Australia. If I can go to the next slide please. One of the reasons we love childcare and the childcare space and lending to it, it's really resilient to economic conditions. It's funded by the federal government of Australia, and I'll talk some more about that in a moment. But it sits within the essential services and the large social infrastructure programs of this country, which means it has a fairly unique risk profile. And if we can go to the next slide, please. As you can see here, the Australian childcare industry enjoys very strong bipartisan support. Two decades ago, effectively, childcare in Australia was minimal. It really had it reflected the low demand for childcare during that time. We've got this concept at Finexia that we call the childcare generation, and over the last generation, childcare in Australia has completely transformed, and it's now become essential service. So as you can see here, the federal government provides 71% of the industry revenue, and that's increasing all the time. Quite incredibly, only 10 years ago, the government was providing $900,000 to childcare, and that's increased to over $10 billion in 10 years. The funding model is a needs-based model. So in other words, as more people require the services, then the government will continue to fund out the services. Besides government, some really important things have happened in the democracy of Australia. If you could go to the next slide, please. One of the most dramatic shifts we've seen is the rise of dual working parents. 20 years ago, the norm was for one parent, typically the mum, to stay at home while the father worked. This has changed significantly over the past generation. From 2005 to 2022, there's been an almost 50% increase in dual working parents. This really reflects that shift I spoke before about in society here. And it really means that both parents are more and more working in Australia as they ever were before. Next slide, please. The upshot of this, and to put this in perspective, today 71% of couples in Australia who have two children under the age of 5 are both working. This highlights the critical need for childcare services in Australia. It points out the reason why the government have been such a strong supporter of it. And it also means that we must have a strong lending industry to the childcare space, and this is what we do here at Finexia. Next slide, please. Another factor driving the childcare revolution is an increase in women's employment. In 2022, 48% of women aged over 15 were employed. This is almost an historical high. The rise in this workforce participation amongst women is a great testament to the gender equality progress we've made here. And it also brings the need for a comprehensive support system for the childcare industry. As more women enter and remain in the workforce, the demand for childcare services will continue to grow. This trend highlights the role of childcare in enabling women to pursue careers. And if I can go to the next slide, please. So not only do we have government support, we also have a growing need, but population as well. Over the next 20 years, the child population between 0 to 5-year-olds, I should say, will increase by 24% is the forecast. That's an amazing number, which means that for our industry, which we're involved in every day of the week, is we have a growing demand for our products. In saying that, if you can go to the next slide, please, it's still quite amazing that 35% of all the Australian population actually now still live in what we call a childcare desert. So this is a location where there's not sufficient childcare services, which means there's significant blue sky in our business. And as we've seen over the last year, the loan book that we have to childcare has doubled, and we can see that significantly growing over the next couple of years. And most of these services are still required in major cities and not just in regional locations, as this shows. Next slide, please. The other thing that's interesting here is that parents cite that location, availability, and quality are all more important than price. So this means we have an industry that's not that people are not fighting on around prices as its major determinant, and there's not a race to the bottom. It's more around the quality of the services, which is obviously very important as a lender. Next slide, please. The industry which we lend to generate great returns. Most of the businesses of which are generating somewhere between 25 to 30% return, which is obviously an excellent place from which they can borrow money and from which we're growing our business. This is a testament really to the government support I spoke of before, and the demography the demography pieces that I explained. This is a growing market of which we're right in the middle of here at Finexia. Next slide, please. So look here, I've just a brief summary of what we do. So if you need to get access, or would you like to get access to the childcare industry in Australia as an investor, there's a couple of ways to do it. You could obviously purchase FNX equities on the stock exchange, or you could also invest in our fund. And some of the information here covers that. And no doubt, if you need any more information, you can certainly give us a call or contact us. Next slide, please. And again, thank you. The final thing I'd like to mention.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead. Thank you.
The final thing I'd just like to mention is we obviously have very strong, as I mentioned before, from a social and economic impact point of view, this industry definitely supports that, and as does Finexia. That's it, Tony. That's all I have to say. And if anyone would like any more information, please get in contact with us.